Beth Ann, do we have any idea how many folks might be joining?
We do not.
How many were on the call on Tuesday?
There were 11.
Okay.
And I'll just keep admitting people as they come in.
Okay. I'll give it another minute and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Sounds good.
We've moved offices and I haven't decorated behind me yet, so it looks horribly boring behind me.
Blank box.
I'm in a box.
We did have some issues, but I think it was Professor Elliott's side with advancing the slides. So can you just test that really quickly to make sure we're seeing yours advance? Yes. Okay, perfect.
Okay. All right. Give it like 30 more seconds and we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully we'll have a few more folks join us. By Friday, I know a lot of people are kind of like, oh, I don't want to learn anymore right now. But this is the easy topic. I mean, we're not, history and theory would be really hard on a Friday,
right.
At least, especially a Friday like afternoon would be a lot of content to try to consume. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully we'll have some other folks join us. But as Beth Ann mentioned, we are recording for other folks who might not be able to join us this morning, and it'll be posted on the website. And feel free as we're going along, just stop me if you've got questions, or we can also do questions at the end. I'm flexible, however works best. So my name is Christina Pastor. I am the Professional Development Officer, or PDO, for the Georgia Planning Association. I'm also a transportation planner and engineer at Kimley Horn. We're a local consulting firm. Well, we're a national consulting firm, but we have local offices here. So in Atlanta. Okay, so let's jump in. So want to talk through a little bit about process. So really this is to help you guys. Some of it you've probably already done. You probably have already registered potentially for the exam, but just to kind of talk through a slightly new process that's really kind of come into play over the last couple of years, and just to kind of talk through what does the exam look like and what are the different steps that we need to get there. So let's first talk about one path to AICP. So it used to be, when I took the AICP and for many, many years, that you had to have your experience and then you could go and sit for the AICP exam. A couple of years ago, they did a pilot, and I'm probably talking beyond my slides. There we go. I should just keep advancing. So it is no longer like that. So a lot of other professions have kind of made that change as well. And now the idea is that you can sit for the exam whenever you want. So they did this pilot program a couple of years ago just with PAB accredited students, so the Planning Accreditation Board. It was successful. And so now they've transitioned everyone over to this one path to AICP. So it doesn't matter how much experience you have. It doesn't even matter if you have, a background in planning, you can sit for the exam whenever you want. And so there's a 3-step process now for all candidates to go through certification. So the first step is to take the exam itself. Part of the reason they decided to change this around also is because in the past, maybe somebody would have their experience, they submit all their paperwork, and then they'd go to sit for the exam and maybe not pass the exam, and then they'd have to pay for the whole thing over again. And so part of the thought process here with reversing the order is if you take the exam and maybe don't pass it, you only have to pay the registration fee for the exam again and not for all the experience and essay portions. So the first step is just to register and to take the exam. It's $255 to register for the exam. If you decide you don't want to take it, let's say this spring and you want to take it in the fall, it's $100 to transfer it to another time period. So the spring cycle takes place in April. The window opened April 3rd and will be closing April 27th. So if you have not registered and you're planning to take it this spring, the clock is ticking on that. And then you have until May 25th to decide to transfer. Similarly, there's a parallel process, or a later process that happens in October for the fall cycle. So that's step one. Step two, then, if you pass the exam, you become what is called an AICP candidate. So until you have all of your experience logged, you have an official title is official of AICP candidate. So you can put it on your email signatures and different things like that. So after you take and pass the exam, then you can become that AICP candidate. After that, and it does say the exam windows May 1st through the 26th, so that is upcoming. The third piece of it then, if you pass the exam, then you have to provide your educational and professional experience. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like in terms of the different tiers in order of how much experience you need based on your education. So that process then is June and December. So for this year, for this spring cycle, it's June 5th is when the window opens, and then it closes on June 29th. So you have to submit by then. That is the additional $255. Once again, so if you don't pass the exam, you only have to pay the registration fee for the exam again, not the experience. Okay, so there's a lot, and there's a lot of good documentation that APA has on their website. So that's a really good resource in addition to these types of presentations. So we're going to talk through the AICP certification guide, a number of different worksheets and calculators just to kind of help you figure all of that out. So this AICP certification guide is located on APA's website. It was just updated for this spring. Oh, I apologize. I don't know if that's obviously not December. We'll go and change that. It was for this spring 2023 cycle. So what it includes is some of the different things that we're going to talk through: the eligibility pre-check, how you go about scheduling the exam, if you want to transfer, some guidance around taking the exam, and then also thinking through some of the experience. Okay, so first question that a lot of people have is, how much experience do I need in order to not to sit for the exam, but to actually become AICP certified? So the shortest window, if you have a graduate degree in planning from a PAB accredited program. And so if you're not sure if your program is accredited, you can go online and find that out. But the Planning Accreditation Board is who does that. So if you have that, if you meet that criteria, then you only need 2 years of professional planning experience to become accredited. If you have a bachelor's degree in planning from a PAB accredited program, it's 3 years. Or if you have a graduate degree in planning, but the program isn't accredited by the PAB, it's also 3 years. So, but that's the next kind of level of experience needed. If you have any other postgraduate, graduate, or undergraduate degree that is not planning and is not from a PAB accredited school, that is 4 years of education or 4 years of experience. And then finally, you may not have a college degree, or you don't have the information to provide it. Hopefully, if that's the case, you do, but you don't even have to have a college degree in order to sit for the ICP. You just need to have 8 years of experience. So that's the structure. There is a tool, and we'll talk about it in just a second, to kind of help you navigate some of that. And that's helpful in case you haven't figured out how much experience you actually will need to do this. So these worksheets are all in preparation for you to submit your experience. So the worksheets themselves are not what you submit, but it helps you to kind of think through. So the planning experience worksheet helps you to determine, does the professional work that you've been doing meet the criteria for the certification? So for instance, if you're working in a space where maybe some of the work that you're doing is planning, but some of it is engineering or architecture, or maybe you work in local government and you're doing, some things that might not seem to be strictly planning. And it's hard because planning is so broad. This worksheet is to kind of help you work through that and kind of think through some of those different things. So 3 overarching criteria as you're determining your experience. Excuse me. Are you able to demonstrate a professional level of responsibility and resourcefulness while applying a planning process for whatever that given situation is? Are you able to evaluate multiple impacts to community when you're implementing these tasks? And then are you able to influence public decision-making in the public interest. So those are kind of the three overarching criteria. The worksheet, like I said, will help you kind of think through what that looks like. There's another one, and some of these they're a little bit there's a little bit of crossover, a little bit of similarity, but they are helping you to determine some different things. So the professional planning experience worksheet is more of a yes/no checklist. It helps you to identify, is there experiences, things I haven't done yet that I still need to be doing? And then for each position you've had, so let's say you changed jobs or you got promoted, this helps you to kind of think through for each role, what was the type of work that I was doing? This is the interactive experience calculator that I mentioned. So this online tool, and this probably actually helps you to figure out, I actually have not tried it. But it might actually tell you if the school is PAB accredited. That would be really helpful if it did. But I honestly haven't used it. So if somebody else has and feel free to chime in and let us know. But this will kind of help you just figure out how many years of experience do I need based on the education that I have. And then finally, the planning curriculum worksheet. You really only need to do that if you didn't go to a PAB accredited graduate degree program, but it really kind of helps you to think about, do you need 3 or 4 years of experience in order to be able to become certified? Let me pause there for a second. Any questions that anybody has so far?
I have a question. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So my name is Brecca Carter. I'm the Director of Community Development in Stockbridge. Let me show my screen so you guys can see me. And I have gone through the whole gamut. I registered, but my question is, when I was going to, for my undergrad, Georgia State, it wasn't a PAB accredited school at the time.
Oh, okay.
And if it is now, I just kind of consider myself, it wasn't PAB. So I think it was like mine is like 4 years or something. But I didn't know if that would be, it doesn't matter because I have the years, so many
Okay.
years in it. But that's kind of, if it wasn't a PAB when you graduated, then that was just a question I've had.
So those are questions we can always ask. APA is really great. They're very responsive. So if we have specific questions like that, we can always send it to them. My guess would be that if it was not accredited at the time that you were there, it probably would not qualify.
Okay.
That would be my thought, because there might have been changes to the curriculum and things like that, if they were seeking accreditation,
Right.
it might have changed. So, but if it's something you want, I can email APA and ask that question. If you already have the experience, it might not be as big of a deal.
It doesn't matter. At this point, it doesn't matter. But
that's a good question though for somebody with.
I just want to enter everything correctly and make sure that if it is, then it is, and if it wasn't at the time, then
Okay, that would be my thought. But I guess if nothing else, if you go more conservatively and assume that you needed more years of experience, it'll just give you extra buffer.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Okay. That's a great question. I haven't come across that question before.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Anybody, any other questions before we keep moving?
Hi, Wanda.
Hi, Brecca.
Why did I go way back?
Oh, that's cool.
We need to have a little study session together, Wanda.
Definitely. I'm in the same boat you are.
Yes,
so.
yes.
That's awesome. It's fun to see colleagues and friends in the planning space. So awesome. Okay. All right. I'll keep moving. I don't anticipate we'll be here for the full hour, just in case you're wondering. My stuff is a little bit easier than some of the other topics. So, okay. So let's talk a little bit about certification support. So first thing is employer assistance. Make sure you're asking those questions. It differs, obviously. Maybe if private sector versus public sector, some employers do, some employers don't, even outside of that. So, but ask the question. The worst they can say is no. Does your organization cover the costs of the exam? And also beyond that, getting the exam is one thing. And there's also other education programs like Planet is in, and groups like that do other like preparatory things that in addition to the free programs like that we provide as GPA and APA and things like that. So does your employer cover any of the prep and cost of the exam itself? But then after that, obviously, in order to maintain your AICP, you must be a member of APA. And so making sure that you are maintaining your certification also comes with some financial costs. So seeing if your employer is willing to continue to support your AICP maintenance over the years. So those are 2 questions to ask. Okay. Another opportunity for support is APA has a diversity scholarship. It is specifically for the exam and the education piece, or the experience piece. So you can apply for one or both, one or the other or both. And so this is really a focus of APA to be able to, we want to bring more diverse backgrounds, more diverse communities and individuals into the planning space. I mean, especially because of the work that we do, we represent, I mean, we're working in communities, we represent communities. And so the idea is, how do we have a planning community that looks more like the communities of people that we represent? And so APA has this scholarship that you can submit online. They do it twice a year, once for the spring cycle, once for the fall cycle. They've changed the way that they do it in terms of initially it used to be just maybe 1 to 2 per chapter per cycle or per year. They've changed it now. Currently, it's on a first come, first serve basis. So they might just have, let's say, 100 scholarships, I believe, for the entire country. And it's up to the individual chapters to submit. So the chapter makes the decision whether or not they believe the person should receive the scholarship, and then we submit to APA. And as long as they have scholarships available, they seem to accept ours. So we've had a number of folks submit for a diversity scholarship here in Georgia. I would encourage you to do it if you meet the different criteria that you see in that first bullet. I would encourage you to do it. So we have an online form. It is currently closed now. They have awarded all of the scholarships for this spring cycle. So we will have another window that opens up in the fall. If you decide to take the exam in the fall or wait to do your experience, then you could submit then also. Just know you do have to maintain an active APA membership in order to get the diversity scholarship. But I think it's a great opportunity. Okay, let's talk a little bit about preparing for the exam. So there are approximately, well, not approximately, there are 170 multiple choice questions. 20 of them are unidentified research questions. So APA will throw some test questions in throughout to kind of see, how is that specific question being answered? Could this be a good candidate question for the full exam later on? So 150 real questions, 20 test ones. You don't know which ones are which. You can see the question balance on the pie chart on the right-hand side. So the content has been reorganized in the last couple of years. So this is the new breakdown. APA has a lot of information on their website. If you go under AICP, you can learn more about the individual topical areas. We're obviously doing some presentations on some of the larger ones or the more fundamental kind of topic areas, but there are some video presentations on each of these different topics on APA's site. So you can see it's pretty well spread out. It has changed in format. It used to be much more of a memorization heavy type of exam. A lot of history and theory, a lot of ethics, a lot of law, like talking about planning law cases and different things like that. It is now a little bit more oriented towards scenario questions. So it's interesting. Allowing people to take the exam earlier would benefit you, especially if it was an exam that was heavily memorization. The closer you are to school, the easier it is to remember all of the planning acts and all of those types of things, right? The further you get away, there's a lot more study that's necessary to be able to do that. But the interesting thing is by changing the questions, changing the type of format of the exam, where you have a lot more of scenario-based types of questions, it lends itself to having some experience. So it's an interesting dynamic. You can obviously take the exam whenever you want, but having a little bit of planning experience under your belt does behoove you with this new exam format. Now, I don't know, I need to actually check with some of our most recent test takers from the fall, and y'all may know this depending on who you've talked to. Because the exam was new in the spring of 22, those test takers did not receive their results immediately. Usually it takes APA a little bit to kind of feel confident with the new exam format before they start releasing immediate results. So I'm not sure for this cycle if you'll be getting your exam results immediately or if you'll have to wait a little bit. If anybody happens to know, please feel free to let me know so I can share that information. Okay, so just some general tips and recommendations as you're moving forward. So planning, as we all know, has had a huge influence on the way that our country has developed. So even though the format has changed and the amount of questions around things like history and law have gone down, there's still going to be important things. So make sure that you know the core pieces of history, right? Hopefully you all had a chance to sit in on Professor Elliott's review for history and theory on Tuesday of this week, I believe. He is an expert in this space. He knows tons of stuff and gets through an enormous amount of content. Thankfully, the sessions are recorded. You can go back, rewind, watch them again, but make sure you know those core cases and the key periods in time from a historic perspective that are kind of core to our planning practice. As I mentioned, with the change, the exam is now geared a little bit more toward assume kind of a practicing public sector planner. So a few years under your belt, maybe working at the front counter, working with, applicants and things like that. So the questions are focused on a national level. So don't focus so much on like local policies and things like that. Think about it from a broader perspective. It's a national exam, but that public sector planner, a couple of years under their belt, is kind of the scenario example. Make sure you're not going to have to do hardcore calculations, but make sure you know basic things: planning statistics, mean, median, mode, how to calculate a floor area ratio, how can you read a graph. Like, you're going to need to do some of that. A calculator is provided, I believe, but you're not going to get into, there's no calculus. You don't have to worry about any of that. And then also just make sure you're practicing. So it's good to go through the documents, reading some of the reports, listening to some of these review sessions and training, but ultimately the practicing piece of it is going to be one of the most critical pieces to make sure you know how the questions are phrased. I mean, these are examples from old exams, right? So or questions that are framed in a way that could be found on the exam. So you'll learn to, just look for certain things. One of the things that someone told me last fall is just some of the nuance in the way that the actual program itself, like when you're taking the exam, there's some weird things. Like, for instance, some of the scenario questions, you might have one prompt, but 3 to 5 questions that come with it. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss the prompt where you have to read that part first before you answer all the questions. So just pay attention, look for some of those buttons that like expand and contract the actual, prompt pieces and things like that. So the more you practice, the more you'll get used to some of those kinds of things, and you'll be more prepared and ultimately more comfortable. Because at the end of the day, the comfort level and not stressing and spiraling when you're in the exam is probably one of the most critical pieces. Now, we do have a number of review sessions. Obviously, the history and theory already complete, the overview one today. We also have administration and management and leadership, and then also ethics. We're working on potentially getting a law session. If we're not able to do that, there are ones from last year. You could go to our archive on our website. We do have some reviews from the law session from last spring that would also be a great resource in the event that we don't have a live one this time. As I mentioned, APA also has a number of overview videos. They're from February of 22, so the new exam format. So those are also good resources. The archive presentations, like I mentioned. And then also there's other, like I said, there's other programs like Planetizen that do other paid training and support programs. And then we also have the study groups. And actually, I think, Breck, I remember your name from the emails. So if you're interested in participating in a study group, we have organized them so far, but people could probably still get added to a study group. But it's just good to have other people to commiserate with and ask questions and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or I took this practice test and this is something I came across. What do you guys think? So I think study groups can be helpful if you're interested. Just go on the GPA website and sign up and we can get you assigned. Here are some of the online resources that APA provides. The documents, one of the documents is the Chapter President's Council Study Manual. I believe it has not been updated for the new exam format. So what we've been told is it's still all the same content. The balance of information and how much of different topics is different than the new exam format, but the general content is still there. So they say that that is a really good document. There's a number of other resources that you can see there. Obviously, pick a few. Don't overwhelm yourself trying to reread every, planning magazine and policy guide that exists. Yeah, so that's some good APA resources. So you take the exam, you pass the exam, now what? So where do you go from here? So as I mentioned, after passing the exam, you are known as an AICP candidate until the experience is complete. So you don't put AICP, but AICP candidate is the official title for someone who has passed the exam, but has yet to get their experience approved. And so APA will also add that to your profile. You must maintain your AICP membership. And of course, as we would encourage anyway, please make sure you're abiding by the AICP Code of Ethics, which tune in to that session. Gary Cornell and Julianne Meadows are going to be leading that one. Once you're done, then when the window opens for your education, employment, and experience, go ahead and submit all of those. And then within 4 weeks, I've heard maybe even sooner, APA will notify you whether or not you've been approved. And then if you have been approved, then you become an official AICP. And that's when your initial dues are also due. Now, after all of this first piece, then you have one more piece that kind of continues on through your life as an AICP, which is our certification maintenance. So you need to basically, there's a little bit of a grace period after you first pass the exam. But beyond that, then there are 2-year reporting periods. So within that 2 years, you have to earn 32 credits. So basically 1 training hour equals 1 credit. And most of them are flexible with the exception of 4 credits. And this has changed now since January of last year. It used to be ethics and law were a credit and a half apiece. Now you actually need 1 credit of 4 different topics, ethics and law, and for now, equity, and then sustainability and resilience. So within the context of the 32 credits that you get, the 32 hours, you need to make sure 4 of them are designated across those 4 different topics. If you're coming to, let's say, the spring conference that's happening on Wednesday, you'll notice when you look at the program, they're color-coded. So you can also see if something meets one of those criteria. So you might realize you're at the end of your 2-year reporting, and you really, really, really need a law credit. So it's helpful to know which sessions qualify for those. You guys don't have to worry about that yet, but something to think about. And then also you can carry over. So if 1 year you happen to go to APA National and both of the GPA conferences, and you've done some additional training that you want to submit as self-reported credits, you can carry over up to 16 credits per reporting period. So if you have extra 1 year, it'll save you a little bit for the following year. I will say I don't always do the best job of tracking all of this. So as you're doing, like going to conferences and things like that, try to stay on top of your logging, because otherwise you may find yourself on December 31st watching an ethics webinar because you realize you may or may not have forgotten to get your last ethics credit. I'm not saying it actually happened to me, but it actually did. So make sure you stay on top of that. All right. That is the end of what I've got in terms of presentation content. Let me pause there. Any other questions, comments, anything I can help with?
I have another question.
Mhm.
So the planning assessments, the worksheets and all of that, that's not something we have to submit. It's just something that we have to ensure that, okay, we're along the right path of what we're, actually participating in and conducting as planning professionals. So I just
Some
want
of
to
the
make sure I was
questions will
clear.
be
I was like, I got all
similar.
these
Mhm.
assessments.
Those worksheets and assessments are all to help you figure out where you are. Now, you will have to answer some similar types of questions and be able to show that you have the experience.
Mhm.
But what you don't want to do is get all the way into that process and start trying to submit things and then realize maybe you don't actually have enough experience. So those worksheets, yes, you don't have to actually submit those specific worksheets to APA. They're just a guide to help you figure out how much experience you need. Have you had the right type of experience that qualifies for APA?
Okay. Okay.
And you don't have to worry about that until after technically after you're done with the exam.
Okay.
If you want to do it now, you can, but you don't have to. You can still take the exam even without.
Okay. But and I'm sorry to jump off for a second for a call here, but for the actual documents that we had to prepare and submit after passing the exam.
Mm.
And I think I probably read through that stuff like a million times, maybe like a month ago, and I got fragments of it still floating around in my head. But basically we're taking the exam. Once we pass it, then we just need to provide our transcripts, our degrees, things like that, or what exactly we just outside of that we're submitting. Because I'm sorry, I think I completely.
No. I don't know if you saw this slide. So this is the 3-step process. So register for the exam, take the exam and pass it. Then you provide all of your experience, and there's specific windows for each of those.
Okay.
So that's kind of the basic process. But I think this is probably one of the best resources, and they did just update this for spring, but it goes through kind of the whole step-by-step process, including the experience assessment, so that a lot of these worksheets and things like that are included in here, in that document. You can download it for free from APA.
Okay.
So
I'll go back through it towards the end as far as what we need to submit and all that, and make sure that's done.
Yep.
All right. Great, thank you.
Awesome, definitely. Any other? I keep looking up because you guys are on my other screen over here. Any other questions or comments? Anything else that GPA or I specifically can do to help? Okay.
If I think of something, I will
You guys all have my email address, so don't hesitate to reach out. And if it's a question, like I said, that I can't answer, I can email APA. We've done it in the past where I'm I don't know. That's a great question. Let me ask. And they're, like I said, super responsive. So they're a great resource to the chapter PDOs, because we definitely don't have all the answers. So.
Okay.
All right. Well, I hope to see some of y'all at the spring conference on Wednesday. And good luck with the exam if you're taking it this spring. And just reach out if you've got any questions or concerns. We're happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks so
Thank you,
much,
Christina.
All
I just
right.
want to remind everyone that our next session is next Friday at 1:00 with Julianne Meadows and Gary Cornell. So I will be sending out a link for that next Thursday, assuming I survive the spring conference on Wednesday.
Guys, if you see
Um,
Beth Ann at the conference,
Yes, you will see me there, but I will
Please-
be sure
please
to
give
get
her a
out that
hug.
link to you guys on Thursday. Thank you so much.
thanks
Awesome.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
You all appreciate it.